2, and 1. This debate operates on a transitionary period. The nuance that the motion provides to the word moving is quite important because it alludes to massive changes that exist not just for law firms as a structure, but in the way in which law is perceived as an occupation and as an industry. I think that Joseph is the only speaker in the round cognizant of this particular nuance because opening government talks about very marginal benefits, opening opposition talks about keeping things in status quo because they're scared of making money, and CEO talks about close-knit connection with the law firm. As of right now, it is only in closing government when you get to understand why the current way law firms operate is on an inherently unfair system, why law firms right now are in the exact same things OO characterized our side to be and why that sucks, and why changing the power structure is the only way of doing things better. Two very clear clashes that exist in this debate. The first is on management, which is what opposition prioritizes. The second is on accessibility, which is what we on government also want to prioritize. Let's explain why CG wins on both clashes. Why do we beat our short cross? Why do we take out OO? 1. OO's questions to open government still haven't been answered, so let's answer them. OO asks, well, why is it bad that an experienced lawyer holds a power in these private equity, in these law firms to begin with? Joseph gives you two very clear answers. The first is that it is by necessity exclusionary. Those in those law firms are quite brutalistic and very biased about who they actually want to get into these law firms, to get into as partners. Joseph points out that the only likely people to get into these law firms right now are graduates of Harvard, graduates of Oxford, or any of the top institutions that exist in your particular country. Opposition's response of small law firms are not sufficient to deal with this because the point still stands that the wage gap is massive. It's a difference between 50K versus 200K. At their best, the wage gap for their lawyers and who they want to cater to is still really, really bad. Even then, right, private equity doesn't discriminate. They can make small firms better. They can give these people a lot more money because they can have every incentive to invest in them as well. Problem on their side. You inherently leave out a vast amount of potentially good lawyers out by the wayside because the leaders of these law firms have very stringent and weird standards that prioritize background rather than meritocratic outcome. The second response is on basing things on more subjective or objective criteria instead of leaving it up to these leaders and their familial and biased way of perceiving who they want in these law firms to begin with. So I hope it's clear that as of right now, OO operates on an island that is not cognizant of the problems that their way of doing things operate. The second thing that they say is that making things profit-driven is bad because all they care about is money, and now lawyers are not in the decision-making process at all. TG Extension patently says that this is false, but even if it was true, we don't really see the harmful impact that OO says exists. It's false because obviously it's not a binary of now every single lawyer is out of the decision-making process. As to what Joseph said, there's a nuance for lawyers to still probably have a massive representation. PM framed this, let's not be unreasonable. But let's say they were correct, right? Private equity has a clear trade-off. They give you money, you are expected to make more money back. Obviously, they have every incentive to make sure things are good. Make sure CO's benefit of team camaraderie also exists. Things like close-knit communities continue to exist and foster, e.g. things like good lawyers making good cases still exist and have every incentive to exist on our side of the house because that's literally the pathway towards making more money. So let's be clear. It is on our side where things are a lot more democratized for people. It is on our side where private equity firms have every incentive to make things more meritocratic based. It is on our side where more money exists to literally do all of those charitable things that opposition wants to do. So on our side, Joseph's impact wins on OO's main metric. 1. We change how law firms operate to cater to lawyers on a more meritocratic basis. Note the importance of this, right? More people from less prestigious law schools have a better shot at going to a big law firm to make a lot more money. This is an exclusive benefit that exists precisely because of the zero-sum characterization of opposition. Secondly, more money just means more pro bono cases because more of the positive benefits that opposition has, but dispersed throughout a lot fairer and more a lot more bigger and a lot more wider scope. The thirdly is we win on accessibility, but also on scalability because big, mid, small law firms can be invested by private equity. So all of DLO's extension continues to proliferate at the point in which this particular thing happened. Before dealing with CO, go to PY.
If the expectation is to make returns for the private equity firm, why are lawyers on your side now not rushing through cases to finish as many as possible? We literally told you that,
I mean, that exists. Like, I don't understand why that is something that only we have to deal with. Because in the same way that the law firm exists on your side of the house, it will continue to be the same like way of operating on our side of the house. The difference is just you're not like exposed so much to the inherent unfair practices that currently exist. That is to say, like becoming a lawyer is incredibly stressful on others either side of the house. It's just that on our side of the house, there's a lot more leeway to make a lot more money and to be a lot more fair with the way in which you do things, right? So that's the exclusive change. More work is not something that's in this debate. Why do we beat our closing? The other closing, sorry. CO extension talks about the current way in which law firms exist and operate. Again, Joseph points out how exclusionary this is. This is the same response I gave to OO. Teamwork camaraderie is not a particularly good benefit they can get when this only applies to a specific type of individual from a like Ivy League institution. Secondly, though, a lot of what all teams say, even CO, just aren't exclusive. Whether you have private equity firms or not, you are still going to have some degree of specialization and organization within the law firm. Even if PE firms are calling all the shots, they can still leave management to existing partners and managers. Both OO and CO assume that exits are bad because they are early. That in and of itself just reflects a market-based capitalist expectation. An early exit is better than no exit. Absent private equity firms coming in, all of the growth that is contingent on the grind of the partners who get the lion's share of deal flow from cases. On both sides, there are capitalist incentives, but when private equity firms are involved, the shift of the model and transition towards their management, you maximize the opportunity cost of that growth when it happens, as opposed to an op where you are contingent on organic growth that is inherently not going to happen for everyone involved. Why then do we beat our opening? Opening government just lacks a very clear nuance in the exclusive benefit that exists for why it's the private equity firms. Joseph answers the question of OO, why private equity firms quite exclusively, understand how an exit works, and are motivated to exist in the best possible way. Profit maximization allows them to have an early, mid-stage, and late-stage possibility for exit, as opposed to an op where it's likely subjective and arbitrary depending on how old the managing partner is. We think all of those reasons like require you to give the ballot to CG. Thank you.